Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pitts. Ukraine War news update, first part thereof for the 24th of August 2024. We're going to start where we normally start, Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before, all the usual caveat supply, of course. 1,160 personnel loss is another big number, in the middle of the range that we are used to, sort of 1,000 to 1,300 odd. So that's a fairly high number there. 9 tanks is about the daily average. 21 troop-carrying AFVs is above the daily average. 42 artillery systems is over double the daily average. 2 multiple launch rocket systems is fairly decent. And 3 anti-aircraft warfare systems is very good for that category. 54 vehicles and fuel tanks, pretty useful. 1 piece of special equipment is low, but it's quite an up and down category given that it's probably got quite an odd and maybe wide remit. Anyway, fairly challenging day for the Russians. Nothing particularly unusual, though. 3 anti-aircraft warfare systems is certainly potentially very good. Now, Andrew Perpetua does not have a loss list out yet, so I can't look to confirm or support any such claims at the moment. We're going to look at a few other bits and pieces. We're going to go to Marinovka Airfield in Volgograd region, where, if you remember, there were some massive explosions there, trying to work out what were in the hangars. Some people claiming that they were non-operational airplanes in those hangars. All the operational planes had taken off previously, but there are scorch marks along the sort of aprons, these 3 places where the aircraft will be parked, and then scorch marks along here by there. So there could well have been destroyed aircraft that had subsequently been removed due to, not wanting the battle damage assessment from passing satellites to pick up imagery of embarrassing losses, but just don't know. So here, Null Report says it's likely that 6 Su aircraft either were damaged or destroyed. A Su-34 and Su-24 were completely destroyed in the repair zone. A Su-34 was destroyed or damaged beyond repair in Hangar 3. 2 Su-34s were likely damaged in Hangars 5 and 6. So here we have a hangar there completely destroyed. And then, 2 were damaged in 5 and 6 here and here. How badly damaged is obviously almost impossible to know with just this imagery. A Su-24 was likely damaged in Hangar 7. It's unclear if there was an aircraft in Hangar 4, but if it was probably destroyed or seriously damaged. So some very good chance that a number of aircraft were destroyed in situ in those hangars. What happened elsewhere, I again don't know. We've got potential damage from other points of the airbase, and as mentioned, you've got this area at the bottom here. Oh, actually, those aren't scorch marks, are they? Now I've zoomed in. You've got scorch marks all over. Is that usual? Would you usually have them there from aircraft? I don't know, putting afterburners. Oh, I don't know. I don't know enough about aircraft moving and taking off, but it looks like there might have been some damage there, but certainly damage to the airbase infrastructure. It's trying to see from here whether those scorch marks are apparent or whether those are shadows. It's just difficult to know, isn't it? Nonetheless, there was a lot of damage caused to the airbase, that's for sure. Ordnance likely taken out, fuels and lubricants likely taken out, and certainly aircraft affected in these hangars. So it could have been quite a successful strike on that airbase. Now, it was reported yesterday, although there's no confirmation of this, no evidence, but it was reported that an S-300 missile system near Mariupol was destroyed. We'll see if there's any evidence forthcoming. Here we've got a BM-27 Uragan multiple launch rocket system in the Belgorod region being destroyed. So that's north of Kharkiv. The attack there, that's being hit by a kamikaze drone. I don't know whether it's destroyed or certainly at least damaged. Actually, if we look at the end of the video, it might give us, that's destroyed. Then we get some information about one of these YPR 765 upgraded. So these are M113s, old personnel carriers, APCs, armored personnel carriers, that the Dutch have modified. And we've seen a number of YPR 765s over the course of the war. The Dutch have given them right from, very early on in the war indeed. And these have been used a lot by the Ukrainians. Now, then they pledged some ones with upgrades. The Dutch have pledged an undisclosed but decent number of these to Ukraine back in May, and it might be that one of these has been seen here. Unusual case when Russians captured and then used a YPR 765 in one of their attacks on the Ukrainian position in Donetsk. As far as I know, this happens from time to time. For example, a few months ago, a friend from the 33rd Brigade, which you, by the way, helped with the communication antennas, told me that Russians were attacking the brigade's positions with the support of a captured M113. Brigade's anti-tank unit was able to destroy it with a Stugna P ATGM. But cases when Russians use captured Western equipment of the Ukrainian army are still rare, especially documented ones. So arguably using a recent YPR 765 from the Netherlands there. Crimean Wind explains, so this is a Telegram channel from Crimea, the situation with a fuel delivery to Crimea after yesterday's strike 2 days ago on Conroe Trader Ferry. So remember that railway ferry that had 30 fuel carriages on board that was taken out by a Neptune missile. According to their information, all 3 existing tankers are no longer operational, while fuel transportation across the bridge has not been carried out since the previous strikes on the bridge. So there are some differing claims to do with whether the Russians can use the bridge. I've seen video footage of a railway cargo train going across the bridge, but then it's difficult to timestamp that to make sure it definitely was done subsequent to the destruction of the bridge and then it's fixing. So anyway, the channel says on the situation with the ferry crossing and fuel supplies to Crimea, 3 railway ferries were operating on a Kerch ferry crossing: Avangard, Slavyanin and Conroe Trader. The ferry Avangard was hit on May the 30th and was seriously damaged. The ship's starboard side was essentially torn apart. Now Avangard is undergoing repairs. It's unknown when it will return to service. Ukrainian Armed Forces damaged Slavyanin on July the 23rd. This ferry is currently awaiting repairs and is in the Sea of Azov. And the Conroe Trader sank after an attack on August 22nd in the port of Kavkaz, paralysing the Kerch ferry crossing for an indefinite period. Fuel is not delivered to Crimea via the Kerch bridge by rail since the structures are weakened after the explosion on the bridge and the burning of the freight train. They also fear that a missile strike could be launched against the fuel train. Therefore, our advice, Crimeans, remains the same: stock up on fuel or switch to electric transport. And then Rob Lee here reports on ATACMS. So these are the missiles, some of them fairly old, that the Ukrainians are using from the American inventory. They have 300-kilometer range and different kind of warheads. Anyway, ATACMS are effective, says Rob Lee, but Russia has also success in shooting them down, as with Storm Shadow and Gimlers. Obviously, the interception rate is higher near important and well-defended targets, so the number of ATACMS or Storm Shadows required to defeat a target may be higher than expected, but they are still effective. And he's drawn from a Politico article. One administration official said that using the Storm Shadow or Army tactical missile systems, long-range missiles that Ukrainians have for months wanted to use to strike inside Russia, might not be as effective as advertised. The Ukrainian military has a limited supply of the missiles, and those they do have may not be able to reach critical Russian targets, which have already been moved out their range. So there's one, the Russians have moved a lot, and 2, they do have ways of shooting them down, which is why we do hear that it takes a good dozen ATACMS maybe to strike particular targets and make sure they're taken out. But anyway, not surprising, but a shame that the effectiveness of these top ticket items has been reduced. Now, moving on to distance strikes, fairly quiet striking into Ukraine. So no Shahed drones at all, from what we can see. Last night, Russian Tu-22M3 long-range bombers attacked southern Ukraine, firing 4 Kh-22 cruise missiles at Snake Island. Interesting, the South Command of Ukraine reports. So that's the island in the Black Sea, up along the coast south of Odessa. The Russians also struck the Kherson region with guided bombs. Over the past day, Ukrainian Air Defense Forces destroyed 5 reconnaissance drones, including Zalas and Lancets, as well as Supercam, Orlantan and Merlin. So a number of reconnaissance drones and kamikaze drones taken out there. The most significant thing that happened last night is the Ukrainians striking, and there is a claim that it's a Neptune missile again. Russian authorities claim to have intercepted 5 drones in Ostrogozhsk, Voronezh region overnight, but falling debris sparked a fire at the munition storage, forcing the evacuation of 200 residents. And it was a massive explosion there, caught on camera. Ukrainian drones paid a visit to weapons storage in Russia's Voronezh region last night, Ostrogozhsk in Voronezh in Russia. Now, I have heard elsewhere that it was a Neptune missile, but most sources are claiming that it is done by, or it was done by drones. Meanwhile, munition depots in Russia's Voronezh region celebrate Ukraine's 33rd Independence Day. So Independence Day, and that was a big old explosion. We'll see if that has any ramifications. Hopefully, that will starve Russian forces of much needed ammunition. When it comes to strikes on oil depots, with what I presume is the one in Rostov still burning, I've not heard it's under control, and we'll come to that in a second. But we are starting to see oil depots get the Mad Max treatment, where they are protected by all sorts of ad hoc cope cages or cope nets. I don't know how effective these would be. Depends what the size of the drone is that is flying into said object. But in Proletarsk in Rostov, the fire is still raging. This is from last night. A train passing by, huge fires. It's a train with the oil cargo on as well. So goodness me, that is quite some risk. Now, there are reports that the whole of Chepavyeva Street in Proletarsk is ablaze. One end of the street is close to the electrified main railway line. This is about 5 kilometers from the burning fuel depot. Authorities say the 2 fires are not connected and arson is suspected. So not only do you have the oil depot itself on fire, but the village nearby, or the town nearby, is also suffering massively from being on fire. Fires in Rostov, says the dead district here, showing some pretty stark footage there, and it's not looking good for the Russians in and around Proletarsk. Right, then where we hear this, so Ukrainian forces for the first time used a new domestic produced missile drone, Palyanitsa, against the Russians, according to Zelensky himself. He announced that in his evening speech announced it in the speech today, actually, sorry. It's Independence Day today, so he's obviously giving the Ukrainian audience something to be happy about. The existence of such a weapon wasn't previously revealed, and virtually nothing is known about it. So, who knows? Maybe this wasn't a Neptune that took out that ammunition depot. It could have been a drone. It could have been a missile drone. A new one, the Palyanitsa. Anyway, moving on to other bits and pieces. We're going to start with, this is all expanded because I can't show you the footage or the videos and images below because they are really disturbing. But basically, prisoners took control of VK-19 prison colony in Volgograd in Russia. Several employees of the colony have died. Several more are being held hostage, perhaps even the head of the colony. It's all been sorted out now. This was what was being reported at the time. Rebels demand $2 million and a helicopter. At the moment, at least 1 dead person and 2 hostages are known. So they were live streaming this as well. Russian propagandists have already declared that these are Islamists, but this is not the end. The Russians claim that the Islamists are Ukrainian agents. Of course they are. It's so convenient to blame any problem on the Ukrainians. Rioters in the Russian prison, says this source to Varna, say on camera that the riot was sparked by the abuse of Muslims by Russian guards. They're also shocked by the culture of the Russians who fled, leaving their own. The prisoners say that they have been asking for medical assistance to the wounded guard for a long time, but Russia is not providing it. Anyway, a number of Russian guards were shanked, and it pretty horrific footage. Don't go looking for it. It's not very nice. Quite a few people died there, and then it was got under control. But this is not the first time we've had this. This is a second Islamist prisoner revolt that has caused the death of guards in Russian prisons. Right, Zelensky has signed a law banning the Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine. The law also prohibits religious organizations associated with the Russian Church. This is not an anti-religion thing. This is the simple fact that the Russian Orthodox Church always has been an arm of the FSB, the KGB even. So the Patriarch, Kirill, is a former KGB agent, and he's the guy in charge of the church. Anyway, they have been essentially working on behalf of Russia throughout the course of the war. So the Ukrainians have eventually got fed up with them and have basically banned the church there. But yeah, this is not discrimination. This is national security, as the church is just an arm of the Kremlin. US hesitates, says Euromaidan press, lifting restrictions on long-range weapons strikes in Russia amid Kursk success, with some officials citing the US will eventually reset relations with Moscow. Ukraine appeals to Biden's legacy and that he will be remembered for this. So this is causing a bit of discussion. Politico is told by the Biden admin officials that they fear allowing Ukraine launching long-range missiles on Russia will prevent the US from normalizing relations with Moscow in the future. As the quote from the article goes, the US will eventually want to reset relations with Moscow, and lifting the restrictions could upend those efforts. I can't believe they're thinking beyond that, the military outcome here, and thus affecting how the military defense of the country is prosecuted by trying to second guess relationships with Moscow. You know, the perpetrators, they need to be punished, or they need to be stopped from perpetrating essentially what they are doing. I just think this is highly controversial from the Biden administration, if indeed it is true. So Washington Post says the Biden administration debates whether to help Ukraine expand seized territory in Kursk region. Quote, the Pentagon has asked the Ukrainians what they need to make their offensive a success, but no decisions have been made to provide material support for those efforts. So good that there's a conversation, good that they're asking the Ukrainians what they need to succeed in Kursk, although it hasn't led to the provision of anything by all accounts. The US has also not ruled out the possibility of transferring its F-16 fighter jets directly to Ukraine in the future. So some good news there, potentially, with the Biden administration, but also some caveats and some issues concerning lifting of certain restrictions. Now, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is on the verge of a blackout, or was yesterday, after a Russian attack, says Energoatom. An external overhead line that supplies power from Ukraine's energy grid to the Russian-occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant in the city of Enerhodar was disconnected on the 22nd after Russian attacks. The state nuclear energy company Energoatom said yesterday. I believe they've now fixed that up. It has had previous issues there. It is a bone of contention between the two sides. Now, because, you know, I love Elon Musk, it's time to talk about Elon Musk again. Elliot Higgins is the chap behind Bellingcat. These are like one of the world's leading open source investigators, hugely important in helping Navalny find out who poisoned Sergei Skripal. I think it was that poisoning incident, and those behind that. Anyway, Bellingcat, an incredibly important part of essentially the war against Russia. Elon Musk's ex, Twitter, blocks Bellingcat investigation into Russian missile attack on Kyiv Children's Hospital, reports Ukrainska Pravda. And then this is just Elon Musk previously said propaganda isn't just about creating fake news, it's about hiding real news. And then Elliot Higgins says, yeah, and you stopped us. You were hiding real news. So what's your agenda? And why are you, Elon Musk, involved openly in propaganda? It's an absolute disgrace. So Elon Musk, I'm not a fan of him, as well you know, and he continues to be a first-rate plonker. Right, Glishkovo, which is the area where there's a bridge over the River Seine in the Kursk region. Let's remember that river that 3 bridges and 3 pontoon bridges have been destroyed at. Glishkovo is still under Russian army control, and this is the very reason why more and more videos are appearing that show them looting the town. In this instance, it is a Wildberry warehouse, Russia's version of Amazon. So Wildberry is Amazon. Just to paraphrase it, this is a Russian town in a Russian province inside Russia, and the Russian army is itself plundering it while caught on CCTV. And this is not the first time. So we have Russian army members going in, Russian army members going in and plundering their own. That's like us being attacked by France and our British army, defending Portsmouth while ransacking Portsmouth. What are you doing? If you're trying to be charitable to Russia, you'd be looking at every opportunity to let Russia off the hook, morally speaking. You'd be looking to say, right, okay, Russia really aren't the bad guys. So, here's some, and then every time you just hit with stuff like this. Like yesterday, it was cutting off a Russian army, a dead Russian soldier's hand by another Russian soldier. We've seen dead bodies thrown out of the back of SUVs in body bags so as not to declare them by Russian vehicles. We've seen Ukrainians be tortured. 95% of Ukrainian prisoners are tortured by the Russians. We see Russians looting here. We've seen civilians looting their own housing in the Kursk region. It's just insane. Right, Darren Masico here. First of all, responding to Medusa, the Russian exiled, media outlet. Parents of non-mobilized Russian conscripts who have been disappeared in the Kursk region or captured by Ukraine say the Russian authorities have not offered any help, and pro-Kremlin activists have pressured them to stay quiet, reports iStories. Conscripts, says Darren Masico, can be used in combat with 4 months of basic training, but the Kremlin for 20 years mostly avoided using them in combat. Treating families badly like this is once again instinctual and rips up remaining social contracts with society. Autumn 2024 draft is in a month. Wow, so we'll be seeing how many conscripts they can drum up in a month's time to send into battle, no doubt. But this is one of those areas that we need to look closely at, because Afghanistan ended for Russia partly because after so long not much was achieved and too many people coming back in body bags. Well, this is happening with the Ukraine war to far greater extent, and maybe it is that Russia are just able to keep much more of a tight grip on their population. Most of those liberals who were against the war have either fled or been put in gulags, and everyone else is under very strict sort of information, under a strict diet of Russian controlled information. So there might be some slight differences in those variables, but potentially there will be a point where Russian families have just had enough of this war, and it's more likely to come from families of conscripts and families of volunteers who have themselves said, yeah, I'm going to go to war because this is what I want to do, or even mobilize. These are conscripts on national service, very young 18, 19-year-olds being killed and captured in large numbers in Kursk. War Translated says Russian sources report that Ukrainian armed forces are allegedly concentrating in the Zaporizhia region for a combined air and ground attack on the Kimburn Peninsula and Tokmak. While these conversations have been going on for several days on Russian channels, the paranoia is likely influenced by the invasion of Kursk. This is something that lots of Russians are talking about at the moment, and we'll finish on this. According to our information, says a source regarding the situation in Kherson, the enemy is concentrated, so the Ukrainians are concentrating forces in the Odessa region as well as in the area in the settlement of Ochakiv. That's just across from the Kimburn Spit. That's where the Marines train, with the aim of attacking the Kimburn and Tendrovskaya Spits. As part of these activities, the enemy is preparing an attack, and with landing forces, drones and unmanned boats. It's likely that aviation will be used to cover ground forces as well as for the purpose of quickly transferring land forces. This summary will be supplemented as new information arrives. According to our information, the enemy is forming a group of 4 brigades with the aim of attacking the direction of Vasilevka Tokmak Highway, so that's now going to the Zaporizhia front line. As part of the preparation, over 150 armoured vehicles have been moved to the territory of the city of Zaporizhia, as well as in the south, in the area of the settlement of Primilskaya, If the enemy does not abandon its intentions, active actions should be expected in the near future. With all this, these maneuvers of the armed forces of Ukraine may be part of an operational plan to force the Russian armed forces to transfer reserves and fire brigades from one important direction to another. So in tandem with what's going up in Kursk, this could be a situation whereby the Ukrainians are going to play an extended game of whack-a-mole, force the Russians to play that game by popping up here and there. I don't know whether they truly have that capacity, but these are the rumours coming from the Russians. I'm not saying it's likely. I'm not saying it's even possible. It's just what the Russians are talking about. Here, a number of monitoring channels report the movement of watercraft in the area of Odessa maritime hub, numbering more than 200 units. So claims from the Russians that the Ukrainians have 200 boats and amphibious craft working in the Odessa area. According to our information, the enemy is preparing a massive attack on various infrastructure facilities in Crimea in the coming hours. Among other things, the list of targets includes a bridge, energy facilities, communication towers and ports. According to estimates from local sources behind enemy lines, more than 40 drones are ready for launch. After the drones are launched, missile launches are likely. In case of an attack, we recommend that you refrain from filming the air defense system and sending it to friends via instant messages. So these are the sorts of messages that are flying about at the moment. We'll see if anything comes of it. David D, who's quite upbeat on Ukraine's chances and where they're at all the time, so take his claims with a pinch of salt, saying what he is seeing on Telegram from the Russians is the idea that the Ukrainians are going to attack across the Dnipro River while also coming in from the side at the Kimburn Spit and Kimburn Peninsula and the Tendrovskaya Spit as well, and yeah, so some various options for landing zones, but that could just be pie in the sky thinking. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate your support. Take care, guys, and speak to you soon.